So joining me now to commiserate over this latest scandal is one of the state's most visible faces when it comes to the push for ethics reform. You know him, of course, Blair Horner. He is the legislative director for NYPIRG, and he is joining me in the studio tonight for a collective cry.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. I'm joking, but I'm really not. I feel like you can't do anything but laugh at this point, because it really just keeps, just when you feel like, we just saw you, Senator Libel, X. Right. Now, you were here less than 3 months ago.
That's right.
And now here you are again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing. And when you read the paperwork that the U.S. Attorney's Office put out, it's really horrible. And again, this is just for your viewers. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. We don't know what's going to happen ultimately.
The U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara said the same thing.
And so, so you just have to say that as part of the given. But the story that's told is unbelievable, and it's just about naked greed and corruption. That is astonishing and similar, sadly, to other stories we heard about Seminario, about Bruno, McLaughlin, Libel. It's just abuse of public office.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that case, when you read, when you're talking about the paperwork, when you read it, it reads like a novel. I mean, there's actually, they tapped Senator Krueger's phone, and there's full-on pieces of conversation and dialogue between himself and this lobbyist whose name is Richard Lipsky. Do you know him?
Well, we've crossed swords with him because in the document there's actually an extensive discussion on the Bigger, Better Bottle Bill, which was one of the issues that we worked on.
That's right. And in that, I mean, this is exactly what speaks to the whole piece of the corruption. It wasn't just influence peddling. It was also, if you represent these clients, this guy who is my bag man, essentially, I will then vote his interests, right, and your interests. And that was, I mean, he was very against the Bigger, Better Bottle Bill.
Right. It was a big problem for us.
Right.
But ultimately, good things happened on that, mainly because of former Governor Patterson. But it's just the kind of sordid tale that is interesting reading, and at some point someone should put all of these together, going back, I guess, to Villela, and putting it all together so that people can see the Crimes of Albany series. And
Volume 1.
That's right, Volume 1 through, sadly, Volume 10 now.
Right.
It's unbelievable. And in the last few years, it's reached sort of like a crisis proportions. I mean, I think the public is probably getting sick of watching political perp walks.
Yeah.
And it's an unprecedented scandal wave that has struck the Capitol.
Okay, so what this does is, of course, reignites yet again. I don't know how much hotter it could get at this point. It's the flames underneath these lawmakers urging them to do something about reform. So there are two things that I want to touch on. The first is a statement from Governor Cuomo who says, if you people don't do something with ethics reform, P.S., no bill yet, okay,
right.
But so we can get to that. If you don't do this, I will create a Moreland Act Commission. What is that? He's actually following his father's footsteps when he does this.
Well, there have been more. Governor Pataki created a Moreland Act Commission to look at New York City schools. I mean, its powers vested within the state of New York in the governor's office to empower and panel a group of people that can investigate corruption and has extensive powers to do so. They can hold hearings, they can subpoena witnesses.
That's the key, though, right?
That's
subpoenaing witnesses.
That's right.
Because really what's interesting here is, and we heard this lament from Andrew Cuomo when he was Attorney General, there's actually limited power in the Attorney General's office when it comes to public corruption. They don't have the power to subpoena in that office unless the governor asks them, specifically empowers them to do so, which is why you're seeing criminal cases coming out of, say, DA's offices and the feds, the U.S. Attorney's Office specifically, and particularly Preet Bharara has been very, very aggressive in this particular arena.
Well, it seems to be low-hanging fruit. I mean, all of these cases are connected. McLaughlin leads to Seminario. It appears when you read the documents, Seminario leads to Krueger. Then who knows where Krueger
Well, but that's also the scary thing, right? Who knows is the operative here. What do we think Karl Krueger is going to say in order to lighten his own sentence? I mean,
assuming he's guilty.
Right. Sorry, I know. We should just give a blanket statement, which you did. This is all assuming, right? All right, now let's move on. So really, though, if you read that, it's 53 pages long, the case against him. It refers to Senate Leader Number 1.
That's
I mean, I'm not going to say that I know who that is, but I presume that there are only a couple of people that could be. And that person was sought to be influenced by Senator Krueger in terms of killing things and or supporting things in the Senate. No money was going to that individual, with the exception of the fact that Senator Krueger was quite generous in his giving of campaign contributions to his fellow colleagues.
Right. I mean, in the Seminario case, there is some reference to a senator that he was sort of modeling his behavior on.
But we thought that was Bruno, I thought.
Well, that's right. And so who knows? I mean, anytime you get a number, client number 9, Senator number 1, once you get a number, you know the people are starting to look at you. And I assume there are some members of the Senate right now that are pretty nervous.
Well, but potentially the Assembly as well. I mean, Assemblyman Boylan was also involved in this. And the problem, though, is when we talk about ethics reform, you can reform and you can establish all sorts of rules. There are existing rules. The rules could be better. You can't force people to follow the rules. I mean, there's just no way that you can prevent, for example, a corrupt lawmaker from doling out campaign cash to his colleagues in hopes that that makes them predisposed to vote favorably when he comes and asks them for a favor.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, in any time you have human endeavor, you will have angels, you will have devils, and you'll have everybody else in between. And what you want to do is construct public policy that all those people in between behave better. It's like driving on the thruway. If there are speed traps, people drive slower. If there are no ethics traps in Albany, people behave differently than if there are. So part of public policy is to set clear standards. Maybe there should be a limit on what you can do with your campaign contributions. Maybe you should only be able to use your campaign contributions for your own campaign, as compared to country club memberships and transferring it to friends.
Or legal defense funds, which
defense
actually
funds.
The Public Integrity Commission has weighed in on.
That's right. And so there are things that you can do to change the standards. You can have independent oversight of an entity that has real teeth. I mean, what you'd never hear in any of these cases with the legislature is the words Legislative Ethics Commission, because they're always hiding under their desk. And the law doesn't really empower them to do a job, even if they wanted to.
Okay, so this mysterious ethics bill that we have yet to see, that everyone's calling on everyone else to pass, that doesn't yet exist, it has been under negotiations for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks now. Do you know any details about it? I know the good government folks have their ears to the ground.
You hear things, but you hesitate to say them in public because everything's a moving target. And I've long since learned never to believe what people tell me, only to believe with what I read when it comes to bills.
Okay, but
so the fights, I think, are the same as they were even last year. How independent will be the oversight, and how much disclosure of outside income of legislators? Now, how public will that information be? How far can you
Okay,
go?
what we are not discussing at this point, as far as I can tell, is a full-out ban on outside income. There has been discussion of that in the past. People have raised it, but no serious talk about banning outside income, in part because $79.5 is a baseline salary, with the exception of the fact that only a few people who are Democrats in the Assembly, because their conference is so large, are actually making $79.5.
Yes.
Everyone else gets some kind of Lulu, a stipend, for a ranking or leadership position because the conferences are smaller. That's just the reality of how Albany works.
That's right. I mean, so yeah, they get a padded income. It can go up to $30,000 on top of the $79.5. And not all of them have outside jobs, as it turns out. A substantial portion, I'd say probably a third, don't have substantial outside income. And lawyers are not the most numerous, what people may think that they are, but lawyers represent, I think the last time we looked at it, a relatively small minority of outside income.
The sticking point, one of the sticking points that we've been hearing about is disclosure and who should disclose, and this idea that not just lawmakers should disclose, but everyone should have to disclose where their money comes from, and even lobbying entities like the Committee to Save New York, for example, which is the pro-business group that is supporting Andrew Cuomo, or even NYPIRG, which is actually largely funded by students, if I'm not mistaken.
Small donations from people that are not students.
And also a fee, right? Isn't that how it works?
Yes, I mean, half the money comes from outside donations of people that average about $100 each, about 45,000.
So there's
people.
talk that everybody will have to disclose. I mean, the problem is that the wider that you get in terms of what you want to include, the harder it is to get to a deal in the end because you have more details that people are trying to broker.
Well, and also it's like what's reasonable. I mean, sticking to elected officials, the reasonableness standard, it's clearer. If you're involved in business activities where that business is before the government, it should be disclosed and the public should know it. Where you get into where it gets more difficult is if you're involved in a business, let's say a law firm, which is global. Do you need to know the clients of your offices in China?
Right.
So it gets fuzzier after that.
Senator Scales has said just that.
Well, and that's a legitimate thing. Where do you draw the line that's reasonable? When it comes to advocacy groups, there are court cases about, in NAACP cases in the South, where they passed laws in the 50s and 60s that said they had to disclosed their donors, where it went to court, and the court ruled they didn't have to. So there are limits on how far you can go with outside activity. The only reason they're required to disclose donors right now for campaign contributions is the court has ruled that there's an issue of corruption. We don't know that to be the case with outside groups. So where do you draw the line? That becomes the hard part. Do you want the names of every donor to NARAL to be disclosed and for those people to face potential retribution? That's an issue.
Right.
So where you draw the lines is very
violence.
hard.
I mean, you've
That's
actually
right.
seen violence when it comes to some of these issues.
That's right.
So we are going to find out, I hope, at some point. There will be legislation that we can then read and parse. We haven't seen it yet. But in the meantime, of course, there are scandals. And I don't even want to say that there might not be any more for another week because I seem to have jinxed this, so I will not say anything at all. I want to thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having
Blair
me. And
Horner.
go ahead and keep saying it.
No,
if
no.
bad guys should get caught, and if the allegations against Senator Kruger are true, he should go off to jail.